if Tanjiro was in the JJK world? Now, you guys wanted this from my newest post at the time, so you guys picked this video, and if you guys want to pick any of my future videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and go check out the post tab on my YouTube page. Now, for this timeline, I thought out basically everything for Tanjiro. I thought about his level, his curse technique, and all of his abilities. I didn't want to take too much directly from Demon Slayer, but at the same time, that's really who Tanjiro is at heart. He's a swordsman, he's a kind person, and his strongest abilities are connected to flame. So I have to include all of that in his abilities while still making him fit into the JJK world. Now, we're gonna start at the beginning of JJK with the Fearsome Womb arc. Tanjiro isn't really involved at the very beginning since he's already been in the JJK world for a little while now. He already knows how to use most of his abilities, but I'll explain exactly what his curse technique can do once we actually see him in a fight. Everything starts exactly the same. Yuji still eats Sukuna's finger, Megumi is there, Gojo fights Sukuna, and Yuji's execution is postponed because Gojo sticks up for him and saves him. The first time we actually see Tanjiro is when Nobara is introduced. In the original timeline, Nobara meets Yuji and Megumi for the first time. But in this timeline, Nobara and Tanjiro both show up, making Tanjiro another member of the squad alongside Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara. When Yuji and Nobara go inside the abandoned building for their test, Tanjiro stays outside with Gojo and Megumi, and they're basically just talking while everything inside plays out the same. But now we get to the Eishu Juvenile Detention Center. This is where everything really starts to change, because this is where Yuji originally had to let Sukuna take control of his body to fight the special grade. And this is also where we're finally going to see what Tanjiro can actually do in the JJK world. Now we get to the Juvenile Detention Center. This is where the original squad, well, trio, really had their first major problem. Nobara gets separated early, while Megumi and Yuji run into the Finger Bearer, which is considered a special grade curse. Obviously, it's not on the same level as someone like Jogo, but it's still classified as special grade. But this time, Tanjiro is there. When Megumi, Tanjiro, and Yuji enter and come face to face with the Finger Bearer, Yuji doesn't immediately get his hand cut off. Megumi originally wanted Yuji to let Sukuna take control, but Tanjiro wants to stay and fight, and Tanjiro is the type of person who would never leave somebody to fight alone. So Tanjiro stays, which also changes Megumi's mind, and all three of them decide to fight the Finger Bearer together. Now, this is where I finally have to explain Tanjiro's curse technique. Tanjiro has a special cursed energy trait called Scorching Cursed Energy. His cursed energy naturally has an extremely hot burning property. It's similar to how Hikari's cursed energy naturally feels rough. Anyone struck by Tanjiro's cursed energy feels an intense burning sensation. When Tanjiro reinforces his body with cursed energy, even his punches become extremely hot and deal more damage. Now for his actual innate curse technique, Sun Breathing. Tanjiro's curse technique is primarily used through a sword. By channeling his scorching cursed energy into his blade, Tanjiro can perform the different forms of sun breathing. For example, when Tanjiro uses sun breathing, Clear Blue Sky, the scorching cursed energy follows the movement of his blade, creating flame-like cursed energy around the attack and dramatically increasing its heat and cutting power. These aren't actual flames, they're a manifestation of Tanjiro's scorching cursed energy. Now, if Tanjiro loses his sword, he's not completely useless. He can concentrate his scorching cursed energy around his fists, making his punches extremely hot and much more powerful. However, without his sword, he can't properly perform most of his sun breathing forms, meaning he's much weaker without it. Tanjiro also has a binding vow. Whenever Tanjiro announces the name of one of his sun breathing forms before using it, that technique becomes 10% stronger. So if Tanjiro says sun breathing Clear Blue Sky before attacking, the cursed energy output of that attack increases by 10%. But in exchange, Tanjiro is revealing his attack to his opponent. During longer battles, an intelligent enemy could start learning Tanjiro's techniques and potentially predict what he's about to do. Holy, that was a lot of explaining, but anyway, let's get back into the fight. Tanjiro is an extremely good fighter when working with a team. Since he has control over the selfless state, I think that could eventually help him become insanely consistent at hitting black flashes. Basically, Tanjiro can willingly put himself into that extreme state of concentration, similar to being completely in the zone. Now, he wouldn't immediately be able to black flash whenever he wants because
that's simply not possible.
But because Tanjiro can enter the selfless state willingly, I think he would have a much higher chance of landing black flashes than almost anybody else. But anyway, the fight continues. Tanjiro starts using his sun breathing forms, calling out attacks like Clear Blue Sky and Solar Heat Haze, activating his binding vow and increasing the power of each attack. And this time, the Finger Bearer actually has a real fight on its hands. You have Megumi, who's one of the best support fighters because of his 10 Shadows technique. You have Yuji fighting up close with his insane physical strength, and then you have Tanjiro, who works extremely well alongside other fighters because of his swordsmanship and abilities like Fake Rainbow. With all three of them working together, I think they could defeat the Finger bear without Sukuna's help. Yuji would probably still be badly injured because he's taking most of the direct attacks, but hopefully he doesn't lose his hand this time. And because they defeat the finger bearer themselves, Yuji never has to give Sukuna control. They recover Sukuna's finger, Yuji eats it since he's Sukuna's vessel, and eventually Gojo arrives. That means the entire situation where Yuji dies never happens. Sukuna also never gets the chance to fight Megumi here, meaning he doesn't become interested in Megumi's 10 Shadows technique at this point in the story, and because Yuji never dies, he never has to secretly train with Gojo while everyone thinks he's dead. Instead, Yuji stays with Tanjiro, Megumi, and Nobara as part of the group, and the timeline continues from there. Now we have the versus Mahito arc. Tanjiro isn't really going to be involved in this arc because it doesn't really include him in the first place. Yuji and Nanami already have everything under control, so everything basically plays out exactly the same. Now this is actually one of my favorite arcs in JJK, so let me know what your favorite JJK arc is down in the comment section, because this one is definitely mine. But anyway, now we move on to the Kyoto Goodwill event arc. This time, Tanjiro and Yuji are both already included because Yuji never faked his death, and Tanjiro is part of the group now, but the plan at the beginning still goes almost exactly the same. The entire Kyoto team still targets Yuji because they were ordered to assassinate him, but obviously that's not happening because Todo gets mad at the rest of his team and branches off to fight Yuji by himself. So Yuji versus Todo still happens. Megumi versus Kamo still happens. Maki versus Mai still happens, and this time, I think the matchup that makes the most sense is Tanjiro versus Miwa. Since they're both sword users, this would actually be an interesting matchup. But Tanjiro is probably way more skilled with a sword, has much stronger techniques, his scorching cursed energy, and his binding vow to increase the power of his sun-breathing forms. So Tanjiro would eventually defeat Miwa pretty easily. And Tanjiro isn't the type of person to gloat about winning either. He's a really nice person, so after defeating her, he would probably just make sure she's okay before moving on. But anyway, the special grade curse Hanami still attacks the event. Gojo can't immediately help the students because of the barrier specifically keeping him out. Tanjiro would obviously help fight Hanami when he gets the chance, but I think he would eventually let Yuji and Todo take the lead. Their teamwork with Boogie Woogie is just way too good, and this is also an important moment for Yuji to grow stronger and start landing multiple black flashes. So everything basically plays out the same from there. Yuji and Todo fight Hanami together, and once Gojo finally gets through the barrier, he fires Hollow Purple at Hanami, and that basically ends the Kyoto Goodwill event arc. Now we have the Death Painting arc. Everything still starts basically the same. They investigate the curse and eventually get to the point where Megumi encounters the finger bearer that has one of Sukuna's fingers. Megumi still fights the finger bearer by himself and eventually unlocks his domain expansion. Meanwhile, Yuji, Tanjiro, and Nobara end up fighting Eso and Kechizu. At first, Tanjiro and Yuji are together fighting Eso, while Nobara gets separated and ends up fighting Kechizu by herself. Tanjiro realizes that Nobara is alone, so he leaves Yuji to handle Eso and immediately goes after her to help. From there, Tanjiro doesn't really unlock any new abilities or get any major power-ups in this arc, but he still helps out and makes the fight easier for everyone. So Tanjiro doesn't have a massive role in the Death Painting arc, but he does make a difference. Now we get into one of the biggest arcs in JJK, the Shibuya Incident arc, and I'm not gonna lie, this arc is always one of my worst enemies when making these videos because so much happens in Shibuya that it's hard to keep track of everything. So let me know if I get anything wrong because I probably will. But anyway, let's get into the Shibuya Incident arc. So if I don't mention what happens with any of the other characters during the Shibuya Incident arc, just assume everything with them happens exactly the same. Starting off with Gojo's part, everything plays out exactly the same because you really can't stop what happens to Gojo unless you add a character strong enough to completely change the situation. So Gojo still fights the special grade curses and eventually gets sealed. Now this is where Tanjiro gets involved. I think Tanjiro would be in the same group as Maki and Naobito. Eventually Nanami joins them, leading to Tanjiro, Maki, Nanami, and Naobito encountering Dagon. This is the first time Tanjiro has fought a special grade curse this powerful. Dagon is obviously much stronger than the finger bearer, and Tanjiro realizes immediately how dangerous he is. Even though Tanjiro is weaker than Dagon, he still jumps into the fight and puts up a good fight. And with Maki, Nanami, and Naobito fighting alongside him, they're able to pressure Dagon, but everything still plays out basically the same. Dagon activates his domain expansion, putting everyone in serious trouble. Megumi still arrives and uses his own domain expansion to interfere with Dagon's domain, and eventually Toji gets inside. From there, Toji completely takes over the fight and defeats Dagon. After that, Toji still goes after Megumi, and everything with those two plays out the same. Then Jogo arrives. Jogo burns everyone in Tanjiro's group, but this time Tanjiro isn't injured nearly nearly as badly as everyone else, because Tanjiro's cursed energy naturally has a scorching, burning property. I think he would have some resistance to Jogo's flames. He's still badly hurt, but he's able to get back up and continue moving. By this point, Jogo is already gone to find Yuji. Tanjiro eventually finds Megumi on the brink of death, with Haruta about to finish him off. Tanjiro immediately steps in. Even though Tanjiro is already injured, he's still strong enough to defeat Haruta pretty easily and save Megumi. Tanjiro then gets Megumi somewhere safe so he can receive treatment. And this actually creates a pretty big chain. Because Megumi is saved before he can summon Mahoraga, Sukuna never has to fight Mahoraga in Shibuya. Sukuna still fights and defeats Jogo, but the entire Mahoraga fight never happens. Now, after saving Megumi, Tanjiro eventually makes his way toward the Mahito fight. By the time he arrives, Nanami and Nobara have already been taken out, and Yuji is basically at his lowest point. Everything still plays out the same until Todo arrives. Then shortly after Todo joins Yuji, Tanjiro arrives too. Now Mahito has to deal with Yuji, Todo, and Tanjiro at the same time. Tanjiro would definitely be able to put up a good fight against Mahito, and I could even see him landing a few black flashes during the battle, but at the end of the day, this is still Yuji's fight. Tanjiro and Todo help him get there, but Yuji is ultimately the one who defeats Mahito. So that part of the Shibuya incident still ends basically the same. Hey guys, make sure to like and subscribe because we're trying to hit 50,000 subscribers, and let's get back into the video. Oh yeah, and Todo still loses his hand during the Mahito fight, and Yuji's brother still shows up and helps him afterward. So everything else basically happens the same. Now we have the Itadori's extermination arc. This arc stays basically the same since Tanjiro isn't there to help Yuji. He's still with Megumi, and eventually Megumi and Tanjiro find Yuji. Now we move into the perfect preparation arc. This is where Tanjiro starts training really hard. After what happened in Shibuya, Tanjiro feels like he was basically useless against some of the strongest curses. He couldn't do much against Dagon, and when Jogo showed up, Tanjiro couldn't do anything to stop him either. So Tanjiro realizes that he needs to get much stronger. One of the main things he starts trying to learn is reverse curse technique. Tanjiro is a really caring person, so if there's any ability that would allow him to heal and save other people, he would try his hardest to learn it. So during this time, Tanjiro is mainly training to become stronger and trying to learn reverse curse technique. But anyway, when it comes to Maki and the Zenin clan, Tanjiro isn't involved at all. Everything with Maki happens exactly the same, including her fight against the Zenin clan, so nothing really changes there. Now we get into the Culling Game. Yuji, Tanjiro, and Megumi still enter the Culling Game, but they eventually split up and enter different colonies. Yuji and Megumi still have their original battles. Megumi fights Reggie, while Yuji fights Higuruma. But this time, we need a completely new opponent for Tanjiro since he's entering a different colony by himself. So let's introduce a new reincarnated sorcerer, Akihiko Kagetsu. Akihiko is a reincarnated sorcerer from the Heian era who's around high grade 1 level, but he's approaching special grade. His fighting style is completely different from Tanjiro's. While Tanjiro is mainly a close range swordsman, Akihiko specializes in fighting from mid to long range and controlling the entire battlefield. His cursed technique is called moonlit threads. Akihiko can create extremely thin, nearly invisible threads made completely from cursed energy. He can spread them across the battlefield, attach them to buildings, trap his opponents, and even use the threads to cut them. This makes him the perfect opponent for Tanjiro. Every time Tanjiro tries to get close, Akihiko can use his threads to keep him away. However, Tanjiro's scorching cursed energy is also a perfect counter because he can burn through the threads. Akihiko can also use reverse curse technique. Not only can he quickly heal himself from severe injuries, but he can also output positive energy, meaning he's capable of healing other people too. And finally, Akihiko has a domain expansion called Moonlit Web of the Silent Night. His domain creates a completely dark environment with a massive moon shining above them and thousands of cursed threads covering the entire area. The sure hit effect causes threads to constantly form around his opponent, and the more they move, the tighter the threads become, cutting deeper and deeper into their body. So when Tanjiro encounters Akihiko, the two eventually start fighting, and immediately Tanjiro struggles. The entire battlefield is covered in nearly invisible threads. Every time Tanjiro tries to close the distance, he's cut from different directions. But using his incredible senses and battle instincts, Tanjiro slowly starts detecting where the threads are. He begins burning through them with his scorching cursed energy until he finally gets close enough to land a powerful sun-breathing attack. But Akihiko immediately uses reverse curse technique and completely heals himself. The fight continues, and Tanjiro starts getting more and more injured because unlike Akihiko, Tanjiro can't heal himself yet. Eventually, Akihiko decides to finish the fight. He activates his domain expansion, Moonlit Web of the Silent Night. Tanjiro is trapped inside, with cursed threads constantly appearing around him and cutting into his body. And this is where Tanjiro Tanjiro is pushed to the brink of death. After spending all that time training to learn reverse curse technique, Tanjiro finally understands it. He starts healing his wounds. Tanjiro forces his way through the threads and unleashes sun-breathing dragon sun halo head dance, burning through Akihiko's technique and landing a devastating attack. Akihiko has already used a huge amount of cursed energy, maintaining his domain and constantly healing himself throughout the fight. Eventually, his domain collapses and Tanjiro wins. But obviously, Tanjiro isn't going to kill him. Tanjiro spares Akihiko, and eventually Akihiko decides to become an ally. He gives Tanjiro his points and can later use his reverse curse technique to help heal the others. After defeating Akihiko and finally unlocking reverse curse technique, Tanjiro reunites with Yuji and the others as everyone finishes their battles throughout the colonies. With enough points collected, the group begins adding new rules to the Culling Game, hoping to save innocent players and rescue Megumi's sister, Sumiki. However, everything falls apart when they discover that Sumiki has actually been taken over by the reincarnated sorcerer Yorozu. Soon after, Sukuna activates Enchain, takes control of Yuji's body, and transfers himself into Megumi. Tanjiro isn't there in time to stop the transfer, but he eventually arrives and joins Yuji and Maki in fighting Sukuna. With Megumi suppressing Sukuna's cursed energy output from within, the three of them manage to pressure Sukuna, but Uraume arrives and helps him escape. Sukuna later completes the bath and kills Yorozu while she's possessing Sumiki, pushing Megumi even deeper into despair. By the end of the Culling Game, the group finally succeeds in unsealing Gojo with Angel's technique. Tanjiro is now significantly stronger than he was during Shibuya. He's finally learned reverse curse technique, improved his sun-breathing curse technique, and become a much stronger sorcerer overall. Before the battle with Sukuna begins, everyone spends the month preparing. During this time, Tanjiro continues mastering the reverse curse technique he awakened during the Culling Game. He trains alongside the other sorcerers and eventually learns how to output positive energy, allowing him to heal other people instead of only himself. Tanjiro also begins developing his domain expansion, because domain expansion requires a sorcerer to manifest their innate domain and imbue their curse technique into a barrier. Tanjiro struggles at first, but eventually completes domain expansion. Eternal Sun. Inside the domain, a massive blazing sun appears overhead, and the sure hit effect continuously burns anyone Tanjiro targets with his scorching cursed energy. By the time the battle begins, Tanjiro has officially reached a level where he can compete alongside some of the strongest sorcerers. Gojo versus Sukuna still happens first, and Tanjiro doesn't interfere because everyone knows Gojo fights best alone. The battle plays out similarly to canon, with Gojo eventually falling to Sukuna. After Gojo's defeat, Kashimo enters and fights Sukuna before being defeated as well. From there, the remaining sorcerers begin their plan to jump Sukuna. Tanjiro becomes extremely valuable because he can fight on the front lines and then fall back to use reverse curse technique on injured allies. He fights alongside Yuji, Yuta, Maki, and the others, using his sun-breathing curse technique to pressure Sukuna whenever an opening appears. Eventually, Tanjiro gets his biggest moment when he activates domain expansion, Eternal Sun against Sukuna. Tanjiro knows his domain isn't refined enough to overpower Sukuna's malevolent shrine directly, so he waits until Sukuna is weakened and temporarily unable to properly use his domain. Eternal Sun traps Sukuna beneath its blazing sun, continuously burning him with Tanjiro's scorching cursed energy, while Yuji continues attacking Sukuna's soul and weakening his connection to Megumi. Sukuna eventually destroys or escapes Tanjiro's domain, but maintaining it pushes Tanjiro to his limit and leaves him heavily exhausted. Tanjiro continues supporting the battle afterward, healing himself and helping keep other sorcerers alive whenever possible. The final battle still ultimately belongs to Yuji, because he's the person capable of directly attacking the boundary between Sukuna and Megumi's souls. Tanjiro, Yuta, Maki, Todo, and the others create openings and gradually wear Sukuna down, while Yuji continues separating Sukuna from Megumi. Eventually, Megumi begins fighting back from inside his own body, giving Yuji the opening he needs. After one final combined effort, Sukuna is separated from Megumi and defeated, with Tanjiro playing a major role in keeping everyone alive long enough to reach that point. After Sukuna's defeat, Megumi is finally freed, and the surviving sorcerers begin recovering from the battle. Gojo remains dead, meaning the Jujutsu world has permanently lost its strongest sorcerer, but Sukuna's defeat finally ends the greatest immediate threat facing them. Tanjiro survives the battle as one of the strongest sorcerers of the new generation. Now, I hope you guys really like this video. Make sure to like and subscribe because we're trying to hit 50,000 subscribers, and please let me know, how do you guys like the video down below? Since this took a long time, make sure to go check out What If Tanjiro Had Gojo's Abilities, since that's one of my favorite videos. And please go check out What If Gojo and other anime characters were in Demon Slayer, since this video is gonna take a long time.